welcome to another episode of Tell Me More, a hospitality data podcast. I am Stephanie Ricca with CoStar News, as always, here with STR's Isaac Collazo and CoStar's Jan Freitag. Hi, guys.
Hey,
Happy
I feel
Friday.
like maybe, I know, happy Friday, Guten Freitag.
You know it.
my God. I'm hangry. I'm hangry right now.
Guys, this episode might be a little wild because Isaac is hangry.
Oh, we'll be fine. Put a sock in it.
I may faint.
If Isaac faints, the show must go on, and we will
Exactly.
carry it.
And
I'll
I have a
take it.
history of fainting, don't I, Jan?
Oh no, we're already starting off on a wild and crazy foot. All right, well, Isaac has water, so we're gonna make him power through. Guys, in the news lately, I want to just call your attention to a couple big headlines that kind of shape what we've been talking about since we last got together. First, it is fewer than 50 days now until World Cup kickoff.
Whoa.
Yes.
I mean, I knew that. Obviously, there's clearly a counter on my desk, but yeah.
Yep. Less than 50 days, fewer than 50 days. If the hotel demand is going to flow in, it better start now, right? I mean, 48 days is what I would call a pretty short booking window.
So I have spent a large part of every day for the last 10 days talking to reporters. I talked in German to people in Germany. I talked to the British press. I talked to a lot of the American press. Yeah, we are all waiting. What's the word? With bated breath. Luckily, Brand Doyle from our team did this super fascinating visual where he showed occupancy on the books for the 11 U.S. markets and some of the international markets where we have the data. And yeah, it's true that for some markets, same time last year, the occupancy on the book was better than this year. Now, I talked to some operators this week, I guess, and they said, well, it's maybe possible that the group rooms that we have on our books internally, just because there's no guest name associated with it yet, it's just a block, that does not flow through your data. Possibly. Okay, maybe. But yeah, it's about time, guys. If you want to book the ticket, you might want to. My working theory right now is that it's going to be the tale of two World Cups. I think the June matches, early round matches, are going to be sometimes underwhelming. Hint, hint, Iran versus New Zealand, for example. But I think things that are happening in July, last 16 teams standing, the powerhouse teams, France, Spain, Argentina, Germany, hello. So that's, I think, where we're going to see full stadia. We're going to see robust room demand and probably a bump up in ADR. The FIFA president a year ago said that this one is going to be like 104 Super Bowls. I think today he wished he hadn't said that. So
because all the reporters are dredging that quote back up.
Right, because I was quoted in an article basically saying, I don't think it's going to be 104 Super Bowls. So I'm like right behind that quote. And, I think that was very optimistic at the time. I don't think we're going to get there. But yeah, is it going to be helpful in July? For sure.
Yes.
Yeah, and I do think it's going to be, just like we've seen over the last several years, it's going to be skewed more to the higher end traveler, right? So I think that's going to be really good for higher end hotels. I just don't think it's as widespread of a bump for the industry, right? So if you're at a higher end hotel, I think you can do well. I think the corporate sponsorships will flow. They're going to have their room blocks, their parties and things. So that will do, certain hotels will do really, really well. And others will be it's a normal summer day, essentially.
And I think in between the game days, there was this hope that we would see continued room demand between June 11, I think, and July 19. I don't think that that's going to come to pass. So we're going to see this run up the night before the game, the night of the game, but then it's going to go back down. So to just echo what Isaac said, I think for a lot of hotels, for the week when there are no games, there's just going to be another week. They're just going to try to sell to groups and try to sell to transient demand.
Right. And many groups, like we'd heard and been reporting for the last year, groups that may have always gone and done an event in Dallas may have said this year, okay, well, we're going to find somewhere else because we know that we're going to be butting up against World Cup. So you'll see some of that. It's been fascinating for me to learn. And our reporter, Trevor Simpson, who I call him our sports reporter. I should probably just, we should make that his title because he's so good at it. But I have learned so much from him and his reporting about not only the dynamics of events like this, but dynamics and politics of the organizations behind it. And many of you soccer fans know
There's
this.
a whole,
There's a
book.
whole world behind it. But specifically, he did an article published recently about the demand trends in Canada and Mexico and touched on, the draws that those countries got and how that plays a role in who comes. So it's interesting and definitely an education. So next time we talk, it will be much closer, and we'll see what's up then.
As I say, you'd mentioned about groups moving out of those host cities. They already are, right? So we talked about it last podcast that we're seeing all the group is that the smaller group markets are doing much better than the larger markets.
Yes.
In general, I mean, obviously there are times when the large markets are doing great, like Vegas with the ConX thing. So yes, but it's really interesting, fascinating. The work we've been looking at is just like all of a sudden you're seeing this movement of smaller groups to smaller cities. And it's also a last minute booking window and things of that sort.
Right.
So I think that continues in the summer with and without FIFA because that's what we
Sure.
already seen in the first quarter.
Travel data is so fun. So speaking of travel data, other big headline, we are in the lead up to first quarter earnings reports from public hotel companies, but the major airlines have been reporting, and takeaways from them are high fuel prices, right? Route cuts. Notice that I said route cuts, not rate cuts. It's very, those headlines I read with interest because I'm based in a market that suffers from route cuts frequently. So we're seeing that. But then at the same time, and this I feel like supports what we talk about in the hotel data, Southwest, American, Delta, all reporting that the demand is there. Travelers are continuing to pay for premium seats. We never talked about that United seat where you can now, you'll be able to buy 3 economy seats and turn it into a bed. Oh my God. I feel like we're a hotel data podcast, but we could do a whole special episode about that.
I think Qantas or Air New Zealand always had that on that very long haul flights, to and from Sydney to the West Coast. But talk about high fuel costs. So the headline that sort of shocked me was that Lufthansa, which owns I think like 10 other airlines, shut down an airline.
Yes.
I think City Wings or City Hopper is just gone. Like you can't book it anymore because they're like, look, fuel prices are too high. We're canceling, I think, 2,000 flights or something. So they're feeling it. And I think the headline there, the fear is lack of fuel, not even paying a lot for fuel, but just not
availability.
Yeah, agreed.
Which, of course, the side effect of that would be super high prices, but availability for any of it. Talk about.
Right, and that's, again, mostly outside the U.S., so I think that's so for the U.S., we're still, I think, insulated at this point, but outside the U.S., yes, that's going to become a bigger concern.
Yes, and that takeaway, though, of demand, when you hear an airline like Southwest, which, of course, started as a more reasonable price, but did a big transformation in the last year, and reported that premiumization is working. Yes, I just made that word up. You're laughing. Yep. It's true. I said it with confidence, so it's a real word. Premiumization at Southwest is working, and it does, if we add in that data with the weekly STR data we've been watching, demand for travel is there.
Yes, it is. I mean, again, we saw TSA screenings up for the first quarter. So again, it really, the odd thing about the TSA screenings is we saw the relationship return to hotel demand. So as screenings went up, demand went up. And for most of last year, there was a disconnect. So yes, something has changed. And we talked about that back in January, back in December. Jan was not a believer. Dare I say it? Jan, I told you so. And so,
can I say it again?
Jan, I told you so. Something had changed. And based on what we're hearing, that change will still occur for a little bit longer.
Then that's a perfect transition, Isaac. Tell us how March
And that was my
shook
and that
out.
was my first note. Jan, I told you so on my
And I
Let
because I
the
deserve
didn't want
it.
to
record
forget.
I deserve
reflect.
it.
Let the record reflect.
Yeah, let the record reflect. We talked about this. Well, again, this going to become no surprise, but March RevPAR was the highest since March of 2023. We saw 5.9%. That's even higher than my estimates. I assumed when I started working through the data, I thought it'd be about 5.3 for the month of March. So it didn't surpass that, which rarely happens. That took the year-to-date RevPAR to 3.8%, also the largest since 2023. And so what's more important, I think, for all of us, not only was demand rising, but it was ADR led. We saw March ADR up 3.8%.
Oh,
So
Wow.
that's the
this
largest
is
since November
US.
of
US,
2023.
right?
Yes, this is all
US
US,
only? Okay.
correct.
And what's inflation, right? This is
Inflation is 3.3% in
so
March.
this is above inflation.
This is
Hey,
the
hey,
first
here,
time we've
here.
seen ADR
Finally.
above inflation in 14 months. So that's again a very interesting dynamic. March was we could talk about February and March. February was the trifecta of Valentine's, and you had the President's Weekend also during Valentine's, and then Mardi Gras moved up. So you had a lot of things happening. And then March, we think, was really the contraction of spring break this year, with Easter being in early April, that you saw spring break come back into March versus last year when it was elongated and led into April. So you had a lot of crazy things, plus more confidence, oddly enough, in travel, because people maybe have just given up reading the headlines and say, we've got to get our meetings done. We've just got, I was going to say something else, but this is a family show. And
That's where we are in the US,
right.
guys.
It's crazy. Year to date, ADR was 2.4%. That is still below the rate of inflation. So the average was 2.7 for the quarter. So just something to keep in mind. I thought what was interesting is year to date weekday RevPAR growth was slightly higher than weekend. So again, you talk about business travel. That's where we're seeing it. Occupancy growth was essentially the same, but just demand, so RevPAR, excuse me, was higher. Occupancy was about the same in terms of the growth rates, weekday versus weekend. Going back to room demand, it was up for the third consecutive quarter, up 2.6% in March and 2% year to date. Recall, I mean, the most important thing is room demand had fallen for 9 consecutive months. And now we've seen that growth. So I told you so, Jan. Uh,
Yeah.
The March absolute level was 2.8 million rooms over last year, and that's the largest gain again since March 23. And what was interesting is February saw a similar increase. Remember, February was record demand. And if you look at year to date now, year to date demand, first quarter was the highest ever recorded by STR. So
I
First
just think
mean,
about that.
quarter
First
for the
in a
quarter,
first
the
first
quarter,
quarter.
yeah.
highest
Most rooms.
demand first quarter ever.
Yeah.
And it's 5.9 million greater than it was in 2025. And the previous record was 2019, which makes sense. And it's up 2.8 million versus that previous record. So, I mean, just a very strong growth, and all hotel types except economy saw room demand increase by more than 2.8%. So it was crazy, just crazy.
In a good way.
In a good way.
In a good way. And then, it's easy. Everyone say it's easy to dismiss the strong performance, the easy comps. But we think there's more to this, right? I think there's a little bit more. So what we were looking at, something we completely missed, we've had 4 months of record monthly demand. So 4 months of record monthly demand for upscale, upper mid-scale. Think about
Mhm.
that.
Wow.
So it's not a 1-month thing, it's
Mhm.
4 months, where each month they've sold more rooms than they had previously for that given month. For mid-scale, it was the past 3 months of record demand, so first quarter. But more enlightening, and again, something I just hadn't seen because I hadn't looked at the data that way, luxury and upper upscale have seen a full year of record monthly demand.
Mhm.
So again, think about the K-shaped economy. Again, we've been thinking the industry was really bad. I mean, it was. We were talking about it. It was weak, but there was a sector of of our industry that was still really people were going to, and the demand was increasing. And again, that would be the luxury and upper upscale. I think it's very interesting. That upper upscale was also part of that because that's your big group houses, right? That's essentially what it is. And then other key points, 40 markets sold more rooms in March 26 than in any other March before. And then 43 markets, including Miami, Nashville, Phoenix, and San Diego, set demand records for the Q1.
Mm-hmm.
And so, again, it just this is pretty widespread. And then just one more point on that one. 31 markets, including Chicago, Dallas, Orlando, and Washington, D.C., saw the second highest demand ever for Q1. And so you could just go, that's just a lot of markets that are pumping. It's just not a single area. It's pretty widespread.
Including DC. That's
Was
interesting. I
gonna
would have
say,
thought
right, DC's been a
DC
tough
with
one.
the comp, with the inauguration comp, but also with the Doge cuts, right? You would have thought less government travel and less people traveling to government offices. So interesting. Okay.
Yeah, that's why I
Mhm.
put that one there because I thought you'd be very interested
Mm.
when I saw it was ranked 2 in its all-time. And again, when we talk all-time, I'm going all the way back to '88. Obviously, those are much smaller demand years back in the so it's really your comparisons, the best comparisons, 2019, 2018, around there. And,
Question,
yes.
real quick, Isaac, are any of the segments losing pace or losing ground? And I want to ask about luxury specifically. Um, I don't mean to be the one poo pooing on luxury, but it's been, like you said, X more than how many months of continued growth and demand.
Well, I
Is
mean,
that still
it's still
sustaining
growing
at the same
demand, yeah.
pace?
It's growing
Okay.
demand, yeah. I mean, I think
Okay.
the growth rates may have slowed a bit, but it's growing demand still, and so we'll have to keep
Right.
watching it. I really think the week we're in right now, which is the week ending the 25th of April, will be a good test to see if this pattern of stronger demand continues, right? Because because the last 3 weeks have been because of Easter and everything, we have all this, easy comps, hard comps. So this is like a regular week, I think. And so it'd be interesting just to see how this week does, and that gives us an idea of how the rest of May. I think April's in the bag, we'll be fine. Demand will be up again. It's really what happens in May. Do we see any change, any difference in the pattern that we've seen? Top 25 led the US. The RevPAR for March was 8.2% on a 5.4% ADR. Listen to that, 5.4%
5.4%.
ADR for the top 25 markets in March. Year to date, the top 25 were up 4.5% in RevPAR with a 2.9% ADR. So again, just below, or actually that was up. That's above the first quarter average CPI of 2.7. 19 of the top 25 markets were up in RevPAR for the month, and 18 year to date. Las Vegas saw its second straight month of positive room demand. We were talking about Vegas all last year.
Ooh,
Again, they've had some
yes.
huge conferences this year. Prior to February, Las Vegas did not have monthly room demand growth since 2024. So it just,
Ugh.
again, amazing turnaround as more groups and transient business comes back. Um, San Francisco obviously continues to grow. It's led all the top 25 markets with 38% RevPAR growth, but part of that's also Super Bowl, but then you got the convention center doing really well. It's had double-digit RevPAR growth for 6 consecutive months. So again, Super Bowl is 1 month. You have 5 others that it's starting to come back. Um, ADR was up 23.5% in the quarter. Again, that is Super Bowl, a lot of that. And then it says, San Francisco had, marked its 15th consecutive month of demand growth. So again, for a market that was down and out, it's never gonna come back, no one's ever going to San Francisco again, there you are, it's coming back
Oh,
little
more
by
than a
little.
year of demand growth.
Yeah, yeah, so more than a year, right, 15.
Yeah.
And then San Diego had the largest demand growth, for March. I think it was March, 212,000 rooms more sold this year than before. I don't know if that's year I think that's March. That's just March. And it had the highest demand of all time for March, which we had already said that. It's the 4th consecutive and largest month of demand growth, and then highest demand growth of any market in 2026 so far. So say again, the US is again really doing it right now. The first quarter was just stellar, and everyone is questioning whether this continues.
Mm.
And I have my predictions to the left of me. I have April and May. I'll start working in June and July. But I don't have a sense that it's stopping, that this was a one-off, and that's why I don't think it was just easy comps. I don't think it was any because remember for January and February, this is growth on growth because last year was up.
That's the
Mhm.
important
Yeah.
thing to
So
remember.
I think something's changed again, whether we're just not reading headlines anymore or we just don't care, but things are different now.
You better be reading CoStar News Hotels
You
headlines.
should be. And then
Jan, what is standing out to you here?
So there's so much here. So,
I
you know,
told you so. Can I say it
I,
again? I told you so. You could
I
have been
always
prepared.
said this was real. No, I did not
That's what
believe
we'll
it.
title the
I,
episode.
I did not believe it in January, and I didn't believe it in February. And
Do you believe it in March?
I, you
Are
see,
you in
I
this?
gotta trust the data. But I don't know if you've heard, but there's a war going on.
Yes, I've
And
heard.
Tourism Economics, Oxford Economics cut its GDP growth forecast to below 2% this year. They increased their consumer price index CPI increases to over 3% for this year, and they cut their consumer spending forecast as well. So wow. And demand in March is the highest ever while all of this is going on. So, how do you square that circle? I am super surprised how strong March came up. I was talking to a management company earlier this week at their all hands meeting, and they're like, yep, this is real. And we're actually feeling pretty good for the remainder of the year. They didn't have a lot of group, they have smaller houses, so they don't have a lot of group demand. But it sort of seems to resonate that there is something different now. The only way I can sort of explain that is to say, well, we had 8 months last year after the tariff announcements for corporate America to figure out, okay, what do we cut? What do we keep? And now that we're back, in the new year, people are like, okay, we have our game plan. Let's go. On the leisure side, the joke is always times are tough. I need to get away. Or times are great. I can get away. Either way, people want to travel. And we're clearly seeing that on the weekends. Isaac and I are doing this fun with numbers thing. Our RevPAR forecast right now for the year is at 0.6%, which is at risk, as we like to say as economists, at risk. But risk means we're going to revise it up. And this is not going to be our forecast. But if you just substitute the Q1 data from our estimate to what's real, Isaac, what's our new
The
RevPAR
new
number for
number.
the year?
Drum roll, please. We need sound effects,
Oh,
Steph.
we do. Well, we have sound effects, but I don't trust myself or either of you to use
Well,
them, Frank.
just putting in the first quarter, doing nothing with the remaining months of the year, just taking the actuals of the first quarter in our current forecast, which we released in January, takes RevPAR for the year to 1.4, from
Right?
0.6 to
That
1.4.
is wild. And now you add to that the next 3 quarters are all easy comps, quote unquote.
Right, right.
And then you're like, okay, maybe this is real.
Again,
So
I worry about my exuberance as well, and so I look at I always worry, it's like, we missed something,
yeah,
but
yeah,
again, the numbers have been very solid, and I keep looking not only like this week that we just finished with was easy Easter comps, right, but I looked at the absolutes, and the absolutes still look really strong, right? The year-over-year change is high, but I'm just like, what does the absolute look like? Is this really doing well? And so it's an interesting time, and so I think, we're hopefully in a good state, in a good place. But again, as we continue to warn everyone, uncertainty remains very, very high. Every hour brings potentially a different change and could impact the psyche of the nation. So while we're very excited about what we saw, and we will probably upgrade we are going to upgrade the forecast
we
just
have
with the
to.
actuals,
Right.
but we may
Exactly.
even change it a little bit more. Yeah, we're very cognizant that this could change because of just the craziness in the current environment.
Right. So I can make the argument for the over, we need to upgrade it. The comps are easy. The Q1 data is so good. And that the math, of course, we can't mess with that. The
Yeah,
math is what
yeah.
the math is. But you can say, the sentiments are different. The consumers are traveling. If I had to make the argument to take the under, I would say, well, maybe the March data is just what was actualized, which was booked 30 days ahead, 60 days ahead, right? When people booked the airfare for March that they flew, they probably booked it in January when they booked their hotel room. Maybe they booked it in February. So I do wonder if March could ultimately be a false positive. Now, Isaac immediately comes back and says, Jan, it's not just March, it's February as well. And I don't have any arguments then
Well, it's
anymore.
also again, the upward trend that I saw began in December because we really believed December would be down as much as November or close, maybe not as much, but in the same area, and it wasn't. And that was my first clue that something was very different because it's like, no, we still had the headwinds of the hurricanes, we had all this other stuff that we were dealing with, and so that kind of just like, that's interesting. That was the first thought I had, is like, I didn't expect that. And then January, when January came around and it was a positive, not a lot, but what I reconciled it was positive despite having a weakish, not a week long, not weakish, week-long storm-related event with Winter Storm Fern, which really screwed a lot of things up for all of us that tried to get to Alice. You couldn't get there. I mean, that was amazing. I thought, "Wow, that really affected half the country, and we still had positive." So,
Still turned out positive.
yeah, again, I maybe we won't I don't think we're gonna see the growth rates we saw in March continue in April. I already know that. I have it on my board, what it is, but I also don't think it's gonna be negative. So maybe our tempering is that, hey, March might be an anomaly in terms of the actual growth rate, but maybe not the growth itself, that there's still growth coming in the next several months. So we'll have to wait and see. There's a lot of things at play. And just to wrap this up, global stuff, just to get because global is not, there is a war going on. So there are things that are impacting.
March is the first time
Right.
hotels in those regions
Well,
have
March
felt
globally, excluding the US, I always exclude the US here, was up 2.1% RevPAR. So that's, and then, for the year to date, it's 4.4. But, and I'll give you some context. March RevPAR, global RevPAR, was the lowest since July. So again, now you're starting to see that impact, but it was still ADR that drove RevPAR across most of the key countries. I look at all the key countries and try to understand, what the drivers are, and then we put everything else in big areas and regions. The U.S.-Iranian war did impact the GCC countries, which is Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, Oman, Qatar, the UAE, where RevPAR dropped by more than 171 basis points. And so excluding the GCC countries, global March RevPAR was up 3.9 versus 2.1. So yeah, you are seeing that impact, and you're gonna continue to see that
Significant, right?
impact. But interestingly, though, there's other great things that happened, right? Most key countries saw RevPAR advance in the quarter. So you have the Middle East, GCC countries coming down because of the war. But of course, Italy had the Olympics. They were up for the quarter 21.7% in RevPAR, most of that coming in February. But then other areas that increased by more than 7% in Q1 included Australia, the Caribbean, India, and Japan. They were up by more than 7% and all ADR driven. Think about that for a little bit. And then other key countries, Canada, China, France, Germany, and Spain were also up in Q1. Not by 7%, but they were up more than 1%. So you saw the growth there. The only other country that saw a decline was Mexico, which was the next largest behind, and was the largest RevPAR decline, not the next largest. It saw the largest RevPAR decline, and a lot of that was centered in the Pacific Central sub or market, which is where the cartel violence actually
Mhm.
took place.
Yeah.
But other key destinations, including Cancun, Mexico Caribbean, Baja California, were also down, but falling ADR, not demand, falling ADR. So there's something else going on there, that is driving the country itself. But, this week it was down in demand, but this week when I looked at it for Mexico, it was simply because last year they had more spring breakers. This year they don't have the spring breakers. So
sure.
there's some movement there as well. But overall, globally, other than the Middle East, for the first quarter, you're not seeing much impact. Again, talking what we talked about lift, talking about higher no fuel, lack of fuel potentially, that could change the story outside the US dramatically. But again, first quarter
We
was
have
also
not
very
seen that
solid.
yet, I
Yeah,
fear.
we have not seen that
And
yet.
and one data point, Isaac, that you pointed out to me is that when you use the I-92 APAS data set of Americans going abroad or international travelers coming to the US, that March was the first one time in a long time
where
that
it
we
went down.
saw the US number come down. So fewer Americans traveling abroad this March than last year, March. And that is interesting. So if I just extrapolate this out to the world, maybe people are staying closer to home and they're saying, look, international airfare is crazy. There's a war. Let me just do what the Canadians did all last year, right? Buy Canadian, stay Canadian. Maybe the Germans stay in Germany or more in the greater European area. The APAC travelers maybe go to Japan versus coming to the Middle East or so. There could be some travel flows that have been severely impacted by this, but there will be some winners out of this.
Oh, and again, Europe can still win because, again, this train travel is so accessible, right? So you may not have to fly. You can actually train someplace, especially in the continent. So, I mean, there could still be, it may not be as impactful. Again, it's what happens with consumers' pocketbooks. It always goes back to, as this war drags on, what happens to cost of living everywhere and how does that hold back? Because to me, it's not just the war. It's just, again, it's the pocketbook that's the most important thing. And right now, it hasn't really happened yet. And then you were talking about the I-92. The trend that we're not talking about either is if you look at the international inbound, it's trending up. It's negative, but it is starting to trend up, and it's been trending up for the last several months. So, hey, maybe that's also a new sign. I don't expect it to be at record numbers, no, but it is trending up, and that's positive as well.
Well, I think when you say when you say trending up, it's less deceleration, it's less decline,
Yeah, but it's a
right?
trend,
It's
but
still
it's an
it's still
upward
decline.
trend. It's closer to 0 than it was a
Fair,
year ago.
correct, fair. So we currently still have declines on top of declines,
Right.
but yeah, it's closer
Yes.
to zero. So to me, what I'm really wondering about is with the World Cup coming, will international travel sort of front load and back load? Are they just going to crunch themselves into this June, July? Is it possible that travelers in 2025 said, let's go to the US? Oh, you know what? Let's just go while the World Cup is on. And are we sort of stealing from 2027? Are travelers saying, oh, I just went to the US in 26. I'm not going to go back in 27. So are we going to see this blip in June and July and then sort of lower numbers in 25 and 27? That's what I'm kind of worried about.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see.
Only time will tell. Now we are moving on to our topics of the month. And Jan, we're going to start with you just to set the stage a little bit, right? I know all three of us, we work out, right? Isaac runs, Jan plays basketball and chases after his kids. I actually work out a little bit. My knees have been hurting. I feel a bit like an aging Hampton Inn.
That
Stephanie,
is a
I hate to break.
transition that I
There's a
did not
lot
see
of life
coming.
in me, but I don't
What?
know. I tried to
Are,
make a connection.
are you
It may
getting
not have
a knee
worked.
replacement? Are you saying you're getting a PIP
A
or
pip?
a Stephanie
I
improvement
am
plan?
not yet to pip phase.
That
I
would
am
be a
still
SIP,
at
a
light
Stephanie
renovation
improvement plan,
phase.
a SIP. Ah,
I'm at refresh.
yes.
Refresh,
No,
exactly.
I'm at,
Wow.
I'm not at full pip. I'm at soft goods refresh, maybe.
No, again, a
Stephanie,
SIP,
Does that
a
cue
Stephanie
you up
improvement plan
for
could be good.
I hate to break it to you. We are all getting older, except Isaac, of course. He still looks young. He is getting older. He just looks very young. Keeps his
This
youthful
podcast
demeanor.
it's aging me.
But
it's putting a few more gray hairs?
who
There is
else is getting
no, those
older?
fell out.
Oh.
Even the gray ones fell out. I thought I was setting you up,
Yes,
Jan,
you,
for
you
your
tried
topic of the
mightily.
month, but it's gone off the
You,
rails.
you, you tried
Take us
mightily.
back.
Let me try to make a sharp left turn here. So, who else is getting older? The U.S. hotel industry is getting older. So, I took the database of all hotels, all active hotels, 60,000 or so that we have, and I threw it into Copilot. We get the question all the time: how do you use AI? Right? We're a data house, we're analysts. How do you use AI? And I found AI not great at writing, honestly. Like I give
Thank
it,
goodness.
a chart
No.
and I say, what do you think of this chart? And it tells me, oh, this bar goes to 5% and this bar goes to 2%. I'm like, okay, that's not actually very helpful. I find it in like okay thought partner. But where I think AI is excelling is in math. When I use the analytics tab in Copilot and just say, hey, do this math for me, it is very fast. And so what I asked it is like, hey, you have a database of all US hotels that are open and you have open dates for most of them. Tell me how old the hotel industry was on average in 1970, in 1980, in 1990. And so today, actually break it out to me by age cohort. Tell me how many hotels were between 0 and 20 years old in 1970? How many hotels were between 20 and 50 years old? How many hotels were 50 or more years old? And it's really just a big pivot table, and I can sort of visualize it in my head, and I could probably do it. It would take me 2.5 or 3 hours, and it'd be annoying. But with Copilot, it took literally like 3 minutes. I'm like, here's the data, here's my question, go. And it pops back this data table. And so I
who
wrote
are the
about it.
boomers? Who are the Gen Zs? Tell us.
Yeah, so not a big surprise, but if you go back to 1970, 70% of hotels were between 1 and 20 years old, and only 10% were over 50 years old. I don't think that's a big surprise, right?
70%. Okay.
So now we go through the decades, and you end up at 2025, where 24%, a quarter of all hotels, are over 50 years old. And 30% of hotels are between 0 and 20 years old. So that percentage of hotels that is young is coming down, and the percent of hotels that are old is coming up.
So the birth rate is dropping?
So, right, because, and then you overlay supply percent change. Let me just rattle off 4 numbers real quick. In 1990, supply percent change, 2.3% for the year. In the year 2000, 1.5%. In the year 2010, 1.1%. In the year 2020, 0.6%. Right? So we're not building a lot of hotels, and we talked about it for a variety of reasons. Everything is more expensive, higher interest costs, blah, blah. Or highest and best use of a parcel is not a hotel, is a data center or something else. But so we have this aging inventory because we're building these things for a long, long, long lifespan. And this, of course, is when I have to throw in my favorite John Q. Hammond quote that the industry is not overbuilt, it is under-demolished, which was true in 2002 when he said it, and it's still true. So we have all these older properties. So what's the takeaway of this for the listener if you're an owner, or if you are a GM with an owner with a sympathetic ear, is the time to renovate is right now. Right? There is not a lot of new supply coming on. You're competing with other aging properties, and you really have to lean into either PIPs that are brand mandated, or you're just saying, look, Mr. and Mrs. Owner, this is the time, because we're not going to have a new kid on the block for a while. There's not going to be new competition. We're going to be the new kid on the block. Let's just spend money into this hotel, into this infrastructure, and emerge not from the ashes, but emerge from the original property into something newer that can then compete. And we're going to be the newer property for quite a while. So I thought the data is super interesting, points at an older stock here. I, of course, immediately got pinged internally by our colleague Hannah, who said, Jan, did you take into consideration also the hotels that were closed in the past? I'm like, no, I clearly did not. She said, oh, I redid the math for you. It turns out the math doesn't really change. It's still the same pattern if you add the other 15,000 hotels or so that are closed right now, closed since the beginning. But the point here is, oh, wow, we are getting older, and owners and developers and general managers have to live with that reality and really focus on how do you attract a guest in an environment where all your competitors are getting older too.
Break down that age group, that number base. It was today, it's what percent are 50 years and older, or was it 75 years and older?
24%, so a quarter of hotels are older than 50 years. 30% are between 0 and 20 years, or between 1 and 20 years, 20 years or younger. And if you go back even to whatever, 1990, it was 60% are between 20 years or younger, and only 9% are over 50 years. So we're just like the American
just like
population.
People, hotels are living longer, and there's life after 50. Let's invest in the aging workforce.
Yeah, but we're not having a lot of hotel babies. you know? So
But
we're not having
we've got slow population growth.
Yeah.
I think it's
We're
it's
not
interesting.
having hotel baby.
It's interesting to me, right? So, yeah, the data is the data. We believe that. But again, is it relevant? I don't know if it's relevant because hotels, even if you're 50 years old, can still be very relevant, right? And so it is about maintaining the property. It always, to me, is the old brand guy is, are you
See?
maintaining the property? And that's the
Which we
most
can say about
important.
ourselves. This
Yes.
is the analogy that I will not
Yeah.
drop. I love it. We've got to maintain the property.
And yeah, you gotta do your own internal PIP or SIP for Stephanie's case, and so but the other thing I thought was interesting is even though the percentage of supply, new supply is coming down, you'll see this in a press release we're about to release, and so at the moment, we have the 3rd highest number of hotels under construction. So it's no longer it so we still are but they're smaller hotels, and, they'll take some time to open, but there's still a good number of hotels in the pipeline. And even though the percentage of hotels under construction of the total pipeline is about 20%, which is on the low side, it still represents a lot of hotels, and it's similar to the number of hotels that were under construction, like in 2016, 2015. So so again, there is properties coming online. It's a little different environment right now. And so I think the average hotel size that I saw was 114 rooms versus it used to be about 125, 130 on hotels. So, but it's all in the press release. It's about to come out on the pipeline. So I'm doing this by memory. So hopefully I didn't screw that one up.
It's a lot more limited service hotels, right?
Of course.
70%
Yeah.
of hotels today in the pipeline are limited service, limited ballroom space, limited
Right.
meeting space, limited food and beverage
It,
outlet.
but
That
there
means
are
smaller hotel counts.
But there are still some big hotels being built. I mean, there are I mean, it's not like there's
Yeah,
none. It's just not it's the same percentage, but I mean, is it Indianapolis? We'll get that new Signia.
The
Yeah,
Signia,
there's and
Nashville,
so
Tennessee, getting
Nashville's
a
Tennessee will
getting a
get a
Signia.
Signia
Signia,
as well,
sure.
and hopefully it hasn't broken ground yet. So, but, yeah, it's just different. Yeah, it goes back to the PIP. Keep those properties
Yeah,
relevant, and to me, a
exactly.
hotel only closes when the area truly deteriorates and the demand drivers are gone, right? That's
Hotels don't die, demand drivers just
I
deteriorate.
think of
Fade
I
away.
think of Piedmont Road in Atlanta. It used to have lots of hotels, a lot of branded hotels. Not so many now. That whole area just is different now. It didn't die, but it's just different.
See, it's a fun analogy. We could go on for days. I love it. It's time for Isaac's topic of the month, and I think he did cue it up for
I
himself a little bit in our previous segment when he said, "Hey, listen, there are lots of hotels over 50 that act and behave like they're 25."
Yes.
Wow.
I am stuck in my body. I am still that 25-year-old stuck in my crazy body.
And that is the cue up that I'm giving Isaac for his topic because he is going to share a little bit about a place you
Hotels
may have heard of.
how hotels dance the night away, maybe dance 6 nights away. That's how hotels are dancing to the bank at this point. So,
Isaac, tell us about Coachella.
yeah, I'll tell you about Coachella. It was an amazing thing as always, but again, it's an amazing thing for the industry. Experiences are still driving travel. I think that's what I keep coming back to. It's like people are willing to pay for the experience, and it's a really great experiences. So we're going to talk about Coachella weekend 1, even though I was at weekend 2. We don't have all the final data on weekend 2, but Coachella weekend 1, which is April 10th through the 12th, so Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, Palm Springs saw its highest 3-day weekend occupancy since the festival went to a 3-day format in 2007, 91.9%. Saturday,
Wow.
April 11th occupancy was 95.2%. That's the highest single day, not a weekend day, single day since February 15th of 2020.
And that's even with additional supply, right? I feel
Oh,
like
yeah.
hotels have been opening there at a pretty steady clip.
Correct. And to
in
get to that
recent
supply
years?
question before I give you more facts, because I knew Jan's going to say, Isaac, that's a small market. No one goes to Palm Springs. I can hear him. Yeah, who cares? Well, Jan,
No, you
uh,
care. I get it. I get it. You deeply care.
I deeply care. Palm Springs is the 27th largest U.S. submarket. It's comparable in size and rooms to Dallas CBD Market Center, San Diego
Oh,
CBD, and Seattle CBD. So in other words, it's not really that small of a market, and it really
okay.
does, and it does really cover the Coachella. He's giving me faces, listeners. He's giving me faces over here, and the
Because
only
we
other
always envisioned you sleeping in a tent
no,
there, Isaac, not a luxury hotel.
yeah,
And
we don't sleep in tents anymore. That's one thing about aging. We don't have to
Yeah,
sleep in tents.
exactly. His 10 days are over.
Yeah. And then going back to the data, so what I did is I created a database where I only looked at Friday to Sunday spans. So the 3 days, Friday and Saturday, going all the way back in time, right? Going all the way back to 2000. Occupancy for weekend 1 was the 5th highest for any Friday to Sunday span. And I just keep thinking this is interesting to me. It's like, again, as we think about the first quarter, how that was high demand, this, again, for Coachella was very high demand for hotels. Obviously, Coachella sells out, so that's a given, right? And a lot of people, a lot of
Mhm.
the general admission is doing the tent thing and doing, the younger
There's a
crowd.
lot of Airbnb, Vrbo,
Right.
shared. Yeah.
But I thought it was really just interesting just looking at this. The more important piece for me, or not just for the hotel industry overall, ADR soared by 16.9% to an average of 636. That's the highest
Nice.
ever for a 3-day span in Palm Springs history, even when accounting for inflation.
636.
Think about that, 636.
Man,
And it's not easy comps to Easter because weekend 1 was the same weekend a year ago, right? So the and it
Oh,
so
so
it was whatever happened, did Justin Bieber just bring all the corporate sponsors and influencers into hotels? Who knows? But something really pushed hotel demand more so than in normal, what do you call it, Coachella weekends.
so
We
Isaac, in your spare time, you're gonna have to overlay headlining performances
Yeah,
with
exactly.
demand, and we're gonna see, is it Bieber? Is it
Yeah, I think we'll have to do
fill
some
in
work.
blank here? I'm joking, but Isaac would
I would
probably
love
do
that.
that.
That'd be fun to look at that. RevPAR, that's great stuff. Weekend 1 RevPAR was also record high, 585. The only other submarket that had a higher RevPAR that weekend was Augusta, which had the Masters. But Palm Springs has nearly twice the supply of Augusta, and Augusta had a lower occupancy. And then I thought it's some other little fun facts, because once you get down this rabbit hole, you've gotta look at through all the data. Since 2014, more than 5% of annual rooms revenue comes from the 2 Coachella weekends for Palm
Of
Springs.
annual, oh,
Revenues, and in April, for the month of April, and I haven't started talking about Stagecoach yet, we're just talking Coachella, because Stagecoach is happening this weekend. More than a third of April's revenues come from that event, Coachella event. So if you don't think it's a powerhouse, and, for those people who complain, "Oh, those kids, they're throwing up everywhere, they're damaging," all the complaints you hear, because it does cause infrastructure issues in Palm Springs, right? Because there's 125,000 people a day trying to get to a festival. It is a revenue-making thing, not only for the sponsors, but for the hotel industry. We should embrace events, because this is huge. It's bigger than I thought it was. I
the
never
power of the event.
And then just we think weekend 2, when I was at, occupancy was gonna be the highest of the last 4 years, the last 4 Coachellas at 86.1%, with still a very robust ADR at $511. So again, people staying in hotels during Coachella, they ain't poor. So let's say
K-shaped economy,
Well,
man. K-shaped economy.
mhm.
vacation. And again, you see that it was just the city was buzzing again, even last weekend, even though it's weekend 2. But it's just an amazing event, great for hotels. I think, again, we should all embrace all these events, because it is bringing people into our industry.
Well, it's been fascinating to learn so much more about the dynamics of events of all sizes and cadence, whether they're annuals like this or one time onlys or, mini series of events like tours. those have all really been demand headliners for the last couple of years.
Yeah, and so we're seeing this idea of the residences now, right? You're talking about a 3-day weekend, which is not really a
Yes.
residence for an artist, but it's 3 days, so the hoteliers benefit from it, and I think there's just a lot more demand for residences, if you want to say that,
Sure.
from hoteliers saying, "Oh, can't you just stay a couple of nights?
Right.
Larger stage for you, but also more demand for us."
And one last thing,
Plannable. We're getting a handle on ticket prices here in the US, maybe.
maybe no, I don't think that's gonna happen. But one
No.
last thought, we started this episode talking about the World Cup. Could this be maybe we will see something different. I mean, this was Coachella, happens every year, and it just popped this year.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we're being too conservative with World Cup. We'll have to wait and see.
Maybe in July. July, I'll take the over. In June, we'll have to see.
Well, it's a good thing that we talk every month and sometimes even more time. So, guys, let's wrap up real quick with our metaphors. And then I will close by telling our listeners where we will see them next. So, Isaac, start us off. I have a little feeling that this might be a Justin Bieber song lyric.
No, it was gonna be almost
Although,
gonna
I
be a
don't,
Madonna, but I had a better one. So I've been because hey, I saw Madonna last week. First of
Papa,
all,
don't
for me,
preach.
in my head, it's Coachella every weekend. That's Lovely the band called Coachella. But I thought the metaphor, because of the first quarter, was from a band called Flower of Love, and it's all one word, O-V instead of Flower of Love with a V. That song is Breaking News. Breaking news, the industry did really well. Listen to the song, you'll love the song, and it works perfectly for what we saw in the first quarter.
Perfect.
That works.
Jan, what do you got?
So you may have heard me talk about that I went to the Cornell Hotel School maybe before once or twice or so. They finally invited me back. Every year the students take over for something called HEC, Hotel Ezra Cornell, where the students take over the hotel and wine and dine the alumni. They finally asked me to come back to speak, and I was so excited to be
I
among
thought you were banned from campus.
Yes, and no, it turns out I was not. They actually thought
Oh,
that,
good.
I was allowed back, and the campus, of course, has changed drastically since I was there in the late '90s. But Kelly Cobb was the managing director, a senior in the hotel school, and they asked me to come be on a panel called the Industry Panel, Pulse of the Industry Panel, and I was joined by Dominic Chu, who's a senior markets correspondent for CNBC, which was kind of cool, like a real life TV celebrity, and Naz Aiden, who founded the Destination AI Forum, which is an interface between AI companies and the hotel company. And we sort of
Ooh.
riffed on the state of the industry. But the HEC weekend always has a theme, and this year's theme was all in the details. And I think this is a very telling theme for the industry, right? That we are going to continue to focus, maybe hopefully on the top line, but very much on the bottom line and everything in between, because on the P&L side, it's all in the details. So I thought it was a great event. I had a really good time. And the craziest thing was I was there Thursday night. Friday, I sort of walked around, listened to a couple of presentations. Saturday, I had my thing. I flew out. And literally Sunday morning, it snowed.
Oh, boy. Did that give you reminders of
Oh
years
my God.
past in
Seriously, I'm
Ithaca?
like, man, Ithaca, New York. It snows in April. This is crazy, which is why I'm glad I'm in Nashville, Tennessee, y'all. So,
Well, see, look at how far you've come. I think this is great. And those topics and more, speaking of which, will all be center stage at this year's Hotel Data Conference, which registration is open now. And I am going to give it a little plug. This event sells out every year. It sells out. You do not want to be on the waiting list. We are opening up more tickets this year than we have in the past. So now is the chance to go and register for Hotel Data Conference. Now, coming up, the three of us will do a special episode from the IHIF NYU conference in early June. We'll do that as a video. You all loved it from Hunter so much. So fair warning, guys, you better, dress nicely,
suit and tie.
comb your hair, put
I'll comb my
on,
hair.
Yeah.
Yep, three-piece suit. I expect it all. Now, listeners, thank you for sticking with us for another episode. Hope you have a great month. Find us wherever you like to listen and find all the news about the global hotel industry at costar.com/hotel news. Thanks, guys. See you
Thanks
next
so much,
time.
guys.
I'm Terence Baker, News Editor, Europe, Middle East and Africa, and I'm the host of The Upgrade, a CoStar News Hotels podcast for the EMEA region. In it, I discuss with special guests the pressures, challenges, joys and exhilaration that comes with managing, owning and developing hotels in our glorious multifaceted industry. Discovering the EMEA region from the scenic northern shores of Norway to the heights of Table Mountain in South Africa, and most likely some chat about birdwatching, distance running and the English Premiership. Join us wherever you find your podcasts, on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify and on other platforms.
This episode of Tell Me More, a hospitality data podcast, was recorded on April 24, 2026. The episode was edited by Sean McCracken. Find all hotel industry news at costar.com/hotel news. Thanks for listening.